Night before the gala that was supposed to celebrate 12 years of my work, my late father's old foreman called me from a number I didn't recognize and said, "Don't sign anything tomorrow, park outside the loading dock at 6 and keep your phone recording." He didn't explain, he just hung up. My name is Sloane. I'm 31, and for most of my adult life, I've been the one who fixes things. When a supplier in Ohio missed a delivery and threatened to sink our spring catalog, I was the one who flew out and renegotiated the contract in a Motel 6 conference room that smelled like burnt coffee. When my mother's hip replacement got denied by insurance, I was the one who sat on hold for 4 hours and then wrote the appeal letter myself. When my younger brother's startup needed bridge money so he wouldn't lose his apartment in Austin, guess whose Venmo lit up at midnight? I never minded. That's the thing nobody understands about people like me. We don't do it because we're saints. We do it because somewhere along the way we decided that being needed was the same thing as being loved, and once you believe that, you'll carry anything. So when Gus called, my first instinct wasn't fear. It was annoyance. Gus had worked for my father for almost 20 years before Dad passed, running the warehouse floor of the furniture company my grandfather started in a barn outside Grand Rapids. He was a sweet, gruff man who still calls me kiddo, even though I was the one signing his Christmas bonus checks now. I figured he'd heard some gossip, gotten worked up, and wanted to warn me about a parking situation or a vendor grudge. I almost didn't go, but I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my apartment downtown staring at the ceiling, listening to the radiator tick, and something Gus said kept circling back. "Keep your phone recording." That's not the kind of thing you say about a parking situation. Let me back up, because the gala matters. Our company had survived a brutal stretch. 3 years ago, during the worst of it, the family voted to bring my uncle in as a co-managing partner. My father had just died. My mother was drowning in grief and paperwork. And my uncle, my dad's younger brother, swept in with a calm voice and a binder full of projections. He'd spent his career in private equity in Chicago. He talked about synergies and runway and right-sizing. Everyone exhaled. Finally, someone who spoke the language of money. I was a creative director and, on paper, held the largest single block of shares because my father had quietly transferred them to me in his last year. He never made a show of it. He just slid the documents across the kitchen table one Sunday and said, "You're the one who actually loves this place. The rest of them love what it gives them." I didn't fully understand the difference back then. I do now. For 3 years, I poured everything I had into rebuilding new product lines, a direct-to-consumer site that finally worked, a partnership with a national retailer that took 11 months and roughly 900 phone calls to land. We clawed back from the edge, and the gala was meant to be the victory lap. 200 people at a restored theater downtown, investors, our retail partners, executives, the local press, all there to celebrate the comeback of a 100-year-old American manufacturer that everyone had written off. My uncle had organized it. He'd insisted on handling the business side so I could focus on the vision. I'd been grateful. God, I'd actually been grateful. At 6 the next morning, I parked my car behind the warehouse, by the loading dock, the way Gus said. The lot was empty except for 2 cars I recognized. My uncle's silver Lexus. And, parked beside it, my fiancé's Jeep, Wesley. We'd been together 4 years, engaged for 1. He was a financial consultant, the kind of man who was good in a crisis and better in a room full of people he wanted to impress. He'd been helping the company informally for the past year, just looking over a few documents as a favor. Everyone adored him. My mother called him the son she got to choose. I cracked my window. The dock's roll-up door was halfway open, and their voices carried out into the cold morning air the way sound does when a space is mostly empty and concrete. I started recording. My hands weren't even shaking yet. I genuinely thought I was about to overhear some boring logistics conversation and feel like an idiot for listening to a paranoid old foreman. "After tonight, once she signs the consolidation paperwork, it's done," my uncle said. "She thinks it's a formality for the retail partnership. She won't read past the first page, she never does. I want you to understand that I did read things. I read everything. But I developed a habit, over 3 exhausting years, of signing whatever my uncle and Wesley flagged as routine partner paperwork, because they were the money people and I was the vision person, and that was the deal. They'd built that habit on purpose. I see that now. They spent 3 years training me to trust them so that one signature would slide right through. And the shares? Wesley's voice. Calm, the same calm voice that had told me 8 months ago, with his hand on my cheek, that I worked too hard and deserved someone who'd carry the weight with me. The consolidation moves operational authority to the management committee, my uncle said, which is me and you once the marriage is on paper. Her shares become non-voting. She keeps the title, creative director. She gets to keep playing with fabric swatches and feeling important. We run the actual company. Wesley laughed. Not cruelly. That was the part that gutted me. It wasn't a villain's laugh. It was a comfortable laugh. The laugh of a man discussing a clever play in a poker game with a friend. She'll be relieved, honestly. She hates the financial side. We're doing her a favor. I stopped breathing. What about the prenup? My uncle asked. Signed it last month, Wesley said. She thinks it protects her. It protects the operating entity. Different thing. By the time anyone explains the difference to her, the structure's already locked. I sat in my car in the gray morning light and felt the entire architecture of my life rearrange itself around a single new fact. The two men I trusted most in the world had spent the better part of a year building a machine designed to swallow me, and tonight, in front of 200 people, I was supposed to flip the switch myself. There's a particular kind of cold that comes over you in a moment like that. People think betrayal feels hot, like rage. For me, it was the opposite. Everything went quiet and clear, like the moment after you slip on ice but before you hit the ground, when time stretches and you can see exactly how you're going to land. Gus appeared at my window. He must have been waiting near the dumpsters. He looked at my face through the glass and his own crumpled. I'm sorry, kiddo, he whispered. I heard them 3 days ago planning. I didn't know who else I could tell. Your dad would have wanted somebody to tell you. I rolled the window down. How long have they been at this? The young one's been here near every morning for 2 weeks, going through the vendor files, the contracts. He paused. He don't think the floor guys know what a contract is. We know plenty. I drove home. I did not go inside the warehouse. I did not confront anyone, because somewhere on that drive, between the exit ramp and my parking garage, the part of me that fixes things had woken all the way up, and she was furious, and she was patient, and she had a list. Here's what those two men, with their projections and their synergies and their poker laughs, had forgotten. They forgot that I was the one who built the direct-to-consumer site, which meant I controlled the admin credentials to every operational account. They forgot that the national retail partnership, the crown jewel, the entire reason for the gala, hinged on a master vendor agreement that named me, personally, as the authorized signatory because the retailer's legal team had insisted on a single accountable individual. And I was the one who'd flown out and sat in that conference room and earned their trust. Not my uncle. Me. They forgot that 2 years ago, exhausted and overcautious after a near miss with a fraudulent invoice, I had quietly added myself as the sole administrator on the dual authentication system that controlled every wire transfer over $10,000. I'd done it for security. I'd done it because I didn't trust the world. It turned out I should have started with my own family, and they forgot the simplest thing of all. The consolidation paperwork required my signature. The whole beautiful machine only worked if I walked up on that stage tonight and signed, which meant the most powerful thing I owned was the thing they were counting on me to give away without thinking. I did not sleep for the second night in a row, but this time I wasn't staring at the ceiling. I was at my kitchen table with 3 laptops open, a legal pad, and a pot of coffee, and I was reading every document, every clause, every email thread I'd been CC'd on and ignored. By 3 in the morning, I understood the trap completely. The consolidation merged our operating company into a new holding entity controlled by the management committee. My shares would convert to non-voting. But, and this is what they missed, the conversion only applied to the entity that existed at the moment of signing. The retail master agreement, the supplier contracts, the e-commerce infrastructure, those were assets held by the original operating company, and they transferred to the new entity only upon written confirmation from the authorized signatory. Me. Again. Me. So the new entity, the one my uncle and Wesley would control after tonight, would be a beautiful empty box. A holding company that held the right to hold things it could not actually touch. They'd own the steering wheels for a car with no engine, no wheels, and no gas, and they wouldn't find out until they tried to drive it. I could have exposed them at the gala. I imagined it, the screen lighting up, my voice cracking through the microphone, 200 faces turning. But I'd learned something watching my father run this company my whole life. He used to say the loudest person in the room is almost never the one in charge. Real power doesn't need an audience. It needs a quiet morning and a deadline. So I made the deadline mine. The gala was, I'll admit, gorgeous. My uncle had spared no expense with my money naturally. The theater glowed. There was a jazz trio, a raw bar, our newest collection staged on a riser under warm light so it looked like something out of a magazine. People kept finding me to say how proud my father would be. Each time I smiled and thanked them and felt the recording on my phone like a stone in my pocket. Wesley found me near the bar and slid his arm around my waist. He smelled like the cologne I'd bought him for his birthday. "You okay?" he murmured. "You seem far away." "Just tired," I said. "It's a big night. After tonight it gets easier," he said, and kissed my temple, and I understood that he believed it. He thought he was comforting me. The cruelty of it was so casual it almost looped back around into something I could survive. When the moment came, my uncle tapped his glass and called me up. He gave a speech about resilience and legacy and the next generation. He called me the heart of this company. The screen behind us showed our logo. Then a slide that read strategic consolidation, securing the next century. A small table was set up stage right with a leather folder and a heavy pen, lit like a prop in a play. I walked up. The applause was warm. I looked out and found my mother in the third row, beaming, and Gus standing near the back exit in a borrowed sport coat, watching me with his jaw tight. I picked up the pen. I opened the folder. I looked at the signature line. And I closed it. "Before I sign," I said, into the microphone in the calmest voice I have ever produced, "I want to thank a few people who made tonight possible." I thanked our retail partners' executives by name. I thanked our suppliers. I thanked the floor team, led by Gus, who has given this family more loyalty than this family has ever deserved. A few people chuckled, thinking it was modesty. Gus didn't chuckle. He nodded once, slow. Then I said, "We'll be finalizing the paperwork through proper channels next week, with everyone's counsel present, the way my father would have wanted." I set the pen down. "Tonight, let's just celebrate the work." The applause came again, confused but willing. My uncle's smile stayed fixed, but his eyes snapped to Wesley's. Wesley's stayed fixed too. They were professionals. But I'd spent 4 years learning Wesley's face, and I saw the exact half-second where the gears caught. I came off the stage and went straight to the valet and went home, alone again. My phone started buzzing before I reached the car. Monday morning, I did not go to the office. At 8:40, I sent the first email. To the Retail Partners General Counsel, a sharp woman named Priya who I genuinely liked, flagging that there is a proposed corporate restructuring I have not authorized. Per our master agreement, no transfer of the vendor relationship is valid without my written confirmation as named signatory. I'm withholding that confirmation pending review. Wanted you to hear it from me directly. At 8:52, Priya replied, "Thank you for the transparency. We'll pause any transition on our end until you confirm. Frankly, the single signatory clause exists precisely for situations like this." At 9:05, I emailed our largest supplier, the family-owned mill in North Carolina that my grandfather had bought from, the relationship the whole product line depended on. Same message, plainer language. Their owner called me within the hour. "Sweetheart," he said in his slow drawl, "we did business with your daddy on a handshake for 40 years. We're not shipping a single yard to anybody you didn't put your name on. You just tell us when it's safe." At 9:30, I logged into the wire transfer system and saw the pending attempts. 2 of them queued over the weekend, moving operating cash into an account at a bank in Chicago I didn't recognize. Both stalled at the same red banner, awaiting administrator authentication. Me. I declined them both. The system logged the timestamp. At 9:34, my uncle called. I let it ring. At 9:41, Wesley called. I let it ring. At 9:58, my uncle texted, "Sloane, whatever you think you heard, we need to talk before this gets out of hand. You're going to damage the company you spent 3 years saving." I texted back one line, "I'm not damaging it. I'm just no longer protecting you from the consequences of building it on me." By noon, Wesley was at my door. He didn't bang on it. That wasn't his style. He knocked the soft, reasonable knock of a man who still believed he could talk his way back inside. I opened it but didn't move aside. "Can we please be adults about this?" he said. "You're spooking the retail partner. You're freezing the supplier. You're going to tank the valuation right when we finally have leverage." "We," I said. "Sloane. Did you ever love me?" I asked. "Or did you just love that I came with a company attached?" He had the decency to hesitate. That hesitation was the most honest thing he'd said to me in 4 years. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he finally said, which was not an answer, and we both knew it. "Sign nothing, you said." I almost smiled. That was the one piece of advice you forgot to give yourself. I stepped back. "Goodbye, Wesley." I closed the door on his reasonable face and the soft sound of him not knowing what to do with his hands. They didn't collapse all at once. That would have felt good. But it wouldn't have been true. It happened the way real things fall apart. Slowly, then all at once, and then slower again as the lawyers got involved. By Tuesday, the retail partner formally postponed the rollout, pending governance clarity. By Wednesday, the supplier's freeze had rippled through the production schedule, and the new entity my uncle now technically controlled had no inventory and no way to make any. By Thursday, the investors my uncle had been quietly courting for the holding company started asking the kind of questions that don't have good answers, like, "Why does your operating agreement reference a vendor master you don't appear to control? And here is the part I'm not proud of, and the part I'd do again." I never raised my voice. I never sued anyone. I never sent a single accusatory word. I did something far worse to people who deal in paperwork for a living. I requested an audit. I filed a routine, polite, devastatingly precise request for an independent review of the corporate restructuring, citing my concern as majority shareholder about the timeline of certain document executions, including, I noted, a prenuptial agreement whose effective date appeared to have been coordinated with the corporate timeline in a way that I, a simple creative director, found confusing. Audits don't shout. They just open drawers. And every drawer they opened had Wesley's fingerprints inside. My uncle's lawyer reached out on Friday. "Ms. Sloane, perhaps we can discuss a resolution that serves everyone's interests." The meeting was the following Tuesday, a glass conference room downtown, the kind with a long table and a view of the river and bottled water nobody drinks. My uncle, looking 10 years older, his lawyer, Wesley, who sat as far from me as the table allowed and would not meet my eyes, and me, with one folder. They expected a fight. They expected me to demand my voting shares restored, to scream, to make it ugly and emotional so they could call me unstable, which was always the plan if it came to that. "She's grief-stricken. She's overwhelmed. Let's get her some help." I'd heard the early sketches of that script through a half-open loading dock door. Instead, I slid the folder across the table. "I'm not here to take the company back," I said. My uncle blinked. "I'm here to leave it cleanly." Inside the folder was a buyout proposal. Independent valuation, the real one, accounting for the fact that the operating assets were and always had been tethered to my signature, a full purchase of my shares at fair value, immediate liquidity, and, stapled to the back, a copy of the audit request I'd filed, with a single line written across the top in my own hand. "This can close or this can continue. Your choice." "You'd hold the whole company hostage," my uncle said, "over a misunderstanding." I looked at him for a long moment. He had my father's eyes, which was almost the cruelest detail of the whole thing. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "I understood it perfectly. I just decided not to save you this time." I stood and buttoned my coat. "You have until Friday. After that, the audit stops being something we can settle privately." By Thursday evening, the money hit my account. I resigned in a single paragraph, written so cleanly that the local business paper ran it as Era steps back as family manufacturer restructures leadership. Graceful. Forward-looking. Not one word of blood in it. My uncle got to keep his comeback narrative, which I let him have, because a narrative is a fragile thing, and he was now going to spend every quarter trying to run a company whose engine had walked out the door with a buyout check. My mother called me 3 weeks later, crying. She'd finally heard the recording. Gus made sure of that, bless him. "I called him the son I got to choose," she whispered, meaning Wesley. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I never saw it. I never saw it. I never saw it. I never saw it." I said. "Neither did I." That was the whole point. I gave Gus a year's salary as a thank you, and a letter of recommendation that I wrote and rewrote until it said the true thing, that this man's loyalty had been worth more than every MBA in the building. He cried when he read it, this big gruff man who'd called me kiddo since I was 9, and then he said, "Your dad knew. That's why he gave you the shares and not them. He knew which one of you loved the place and which ones loved what it gave them." I'd heard those words before, at a kitchen table, on a Sunday, from a man I missed every single day. Wesley mailed the ring back with no note. I sold it and gave the money to the Women's Legal Aid Fund downtown, the one that helps people read the fine print before they sign their lives away. It felt like the right place for it. People ask if I regret not blowing it all up in front of 200 people at that gala, not getting the satisfaction of the scene. I tell them the truth. Revenge that needs an audience isn't revenge. It's a performance, and it leaves you just as empty as it leaves them. What I wanted wasn't applause, it was the quiet. I have a small studio now, my own name on the lease, 3 employees I pay well and trust completely. I designed furniture again, with my hands, the way I started, before I became the family's load-bearing wall. Some mornings I still wake before dawn out of habit, braced for a crisis that isn't coming. They spent 3 years teaching me to sign without reading, so that one morning I'd give away everything without looking up. What they never understood is that I was always reading. I just hadn't decided yet what I was willing to walk away from. The morning before that gala, hidden in a parked car with my phone recording and an old man crying at my window, I finally found out. And it turned out the answer was all of it, except myself. For a long time I believed that being needed was the same as being loved, and that belief almost cost me everything I'd built. My uncle and Wesley didn't pluck me out of the blue, they studied me. They saw a woman who signed without reading because she'd been trained, gently, patiently, over 3 years, to trust the people handing her the pen. The trap didn't work because they were clever. It worked because I had handed them the blueprint, one quiet act of self-erasure at a time. That's the first thing I had to sit with. Nobody steals from you without help, and the help is usually your own exhaustion. But the same habits they tried to use against me were the ones that saved me. The morning I sat in that car with Gus crying at my window, I didn't win because I was angry. Plenty of people are angry and still lose. I won because for 3 years I had quietly done the unglamorous, careful work nobody thanked me for. I added myself to the authentication system. I read the master agreement clause by clause until my eyes burned. I flew to that motel conference room and earned a relationship that no signature could transfer without me. The patience that made me a doormat was the exact same patience that, pointed in a new direction, became a scalpel. Character isn't loud. It compounds quietly in the dark, until one morning it's the only thing holding you up. And I had to decide who I was going to be in the moment it mattered. It would have felt incredible to detonate everything on stage in front of 200 people. I wanted to. But revenge that needs an audience isn't strength. It's a performance, and it would have made me exactly as hollow as the men who hurt me. Choosing the quiet morning over the loud scene, choosing the audit over the scream. That took a steadier nerve than rage ever could. I didn't burn the company my grandfather built in a barn. I refused to let them burn it through me, and then I walked out clean. If you're carrying a family on your back right now, hear me. Read the fine print, all of it. Even when they make you feel paranoid for asking. Do the boring, careful work before you need it. Because you will not have time to learn courage in the middle of the crisis. You'll only have time to use what you already built. And when the moment comes to decide what you're willing to walk away from, be honest about the answer. Mine turned out to be everything except myself. I gave up the company, the title, the man, the version of me that everyone found so useful. What I kept was the only thing that was ever really mine. They taught me to sign without looking up. They forgot I was always reading, and the day I finally looked up was the day they lost.